Hello, my name is Hope Perryman, and today's presentation will be going through ethanol biodiesel, which is a specific type of biofuel production. Moving to our first slide, it's just a table of contents containing an overview of everything we'll be going through in this presentation. On the first slide, we have ethanol biodiesel background. In 1876, ethanol energy was used for the first time. 1908, Henry Ford used this to power the first ever vehicle. In the 1920s, there was a fuel shortage because of World War II, so we started to use ethanol. In the 1970s, ethanol began to be used as a safer and cleaner fuel option compared to petroleum. And in 2023, we are still growing and providing incentives for this fuel and energy resource. Next, we'll be going into how is ethanol biodiesel produced. So on the left, we have a graphic that puts it into more simpler terms, but we're going to go through the steps more specifically right now. So most biodiesel, especially ethanol, is created by cultivating crops, specifically starch-based crops like corn. The first step of this is milling, which turns the kernels of corn into flour, or they can be turned into meal, which is more known as starch. And this plays a huge role because it contains carbohydrates that create chains that are needed for ethanol. The next step is liquefaction, where water is added to create a muck-like substance. It is heated and creates smaller particles, where an enzyme can catalyze the particles. Catalyze just means speeds up. After this step, we go into saccharification step, which is the particles breaking into simple molecules again by speeding up and adding another enzyme. Moving into fermentation, we add yeast, which is breaking down our glucose to create ethanol. And then finally, we need to go through dehydration, evaporation, and condensation to pretty much finish off this process, and this is called distillation. And to finally finish off this step, we do denaturation, which is just adding the gasoline to our purest form of ethanol, which is 95%. Our next slide is going over the development of ethanol biodiesel. As we can see, it's a pretty rigorous process, but it's becoming more widespread in the Middle West United States, and you can see that at many gas stations. A fun fact is if you look at the label, E10, for instance, would show you how much ethanol and biodiesel or diesel is in a specific pump. Moving on to our carbon footprint. Our carbon footprint is mainly seen in the milling process of CO2, but new technologies are being invented to slow the CO2 emission. The economic impact is seen more long-term rather than short-term, and especially seen for those producing the ethanol biodiesel, but overall it is going to be seen more long-term than short-term. The next slide just goes over pretty much how they're encouraging ethanol biodiesel to be used and communicated to the public. This can be seen in tax credit. There's a 30% tax return, but you can't exceed $30,000. There's grants for infrastructure, education, and many other things for the production of ethanol biodiesel, and loans and funding that are given by the federal government as an incentive to state and local governments for the least amount of emission. Based on the research and real-life examples I've seen through ethanol biodiesel, it is growing our transportation in the United States and all over the world. There still needs to be improvements, but overall there is a huge difference in petroleum and ethanol biodiesel. My plan of action would be firstly to go more locally and focus on Aggie Land buses, making them use ethanol biofuel production rather than petroleum. In the long run, it will be more beneficial, and even though it is more costly in the moment, and then more widespread, I would increase and engineer metabolic pathways for potential limiting of CO2 emission. This is our citations for the entire presentation, and thank you so much for your time.